Have you ever felt like there's more to see than meets the eye? Almost like a hidden superpower just waiting to be unlocked. What if I told you your own eyes might hold a secret capability, maybe something straight out of a sci-fi movie, to actually glimpse the invisible? Imagine being able to perceive something just beyond the everyday rainbow we all kind of take for granted. Okay, let's unpack this. Today we're diving deep into the really fascinating world of human vision. We're going way beyond what we thought was possible. We've gathered some incredible sources for this. We've got some foundational stuff like Wikipedia entries on the evolution of color vision and the visible spectrum, plus a great summary document explaining why we see the colors we do. But we're also digging into some pretty groundbreaking research. There's a pivotal paper by Palcheska and colleagues on human infrared vision, which is amazing, and a really thought-provoking study by Delgado Bonal and Martin Torres that looks at human vision through the lens of information theory. So our mission for this deep dive is basically this. Understand the evolutionary dance behind why our eyes focus on certain colors, uncover the surprising kind of hidden ability to perceive the invisible, and then explore a brand new theory about why our vision is tuned exactly the way it is. Get ready for some truly eye-opening moments. Right, let's start with the basics. We look out at the world, and it's just this glorious canvas of color, isn't it? We often take visible light for granted, but what's the fundamental reason? Why did our biology land on this particular slice of the electromagnetic spectrum?
Yeah, it's fascinating, actually. It's how perfectly adapted our vision is to our environment. If you look at the core reasons, like those highlighted in the summary doc and the Evolution of Color Vision article, three key factors really pop out. First, it's all about the sun's peak performance. Our sun, it's a powerhouse, right? It floods Earth with energy. But after that energy filters through our atmosphere, the most intense part of it lands squarely in what we call the visible light spectrum. It peaks around 500 nanometers, which, we perceive as green. So evolution, being super pragmatic, naturally favored senses that could tap into this super abundant resource.
Okay, yeah, like setting up your fishing net where most of the fish are swimming, that makes perfect sense. We're tuned to the sun's most efficient output. So what's the second big reason?
Well, secondly, you've got to consider the aquatic filter. Life, and therefore eyes, first evolved underwater. And water acts as a kind of natural shield. It blocks out most infrared IR and ultraviolet, UV, radiation. This creates what scientists call an aquatic optical window, basically just for visible light. The visible spectrum article confirms this, noting that water's minimum absorption is around 418 nanometers. That's blue light.
Ah, right. That's why deep, clear ocean water looks so blue.
Exactly. Our ancient ancestors literally opened their eyes to the light that was most available, and importantly, safest for them in that environment.
So from the sun's output to the very medium, life began in visible light just? Well, it made the most sense. Okay, and the third reason?
Family, it's kind of the Goldilocks energy level. Visible light photons, they have just the right amount of energy. They're strong enough to trigger that crucial chemical reaction in our eyes. It's essentially a light-driven shape change in a molecule called retinal. But they're not so powerful they damage sensitive cells. Unlike, say, harsh UV light. Infrared, on the other hand, is generally too weak. It can't reliably cause this reaction without being confused with our own body heat,
Yeah. So visible light is just right. It activates our vision without frying our retinas.
Precisely.
It's really clear our ancient ancestors, whether swimming in the ocean or later venturing onto land, developed this visual toolkit that was perfectly suited for survival. It's such a beautifully efficient system, isn't it? But you mentioned evolutionary pressures earlier. How did those pressures actually refine the building blocks, like the opsin proteins?
Yeah, that's a great question because it really shows the incredible adaptability of our biology. The evolution of color vision source explains that our ability to detect light comes down to these specialized opsin proteins. They're like the light-sensitive switches in our photoreceptor cells.
Yeah.
Now get this. Early vertebrates actually had tetrachromatic vision.
4 colors.
4 cone opsins, yeah, giving them this incredibly rich perception of color. But through various evolutionary paths, most mammals today are actually dichromatic, just 2 opsins.
Huh. So that's sort of like red-green color blindness in humans?
Somewhat analogous, yes. So it seems we lost some color perception along the way.
Okay, so we lost something.
For a time, yes. But here's the twist. Humans and other old world primates, we actually redeveloped trichromatic vision with 3 opsins. This happened through something called gene duplication. An existing gene got copied, and then the copy evolved to do a slightly different job.
Wow.
And this re-evolution wasn't just random chance. It was under intense evolutionary pressure. Think about tree-dwelling primates. Having trichromatic vision became really vital.
Why? What was the advantage?
Well, for discerning red and orange fruits against all that green foliage, or spotting nutrient-rich new leaves. It could even potentially help detect subtle skin flushing for social cues within their groups. There's a study mentioned in the Wikipedia article from Biological Reviews that fascinatingly suggests animal color vision emerged about 500 million years ago.
500 million years.
Yeah, before many brightly colored organisms even appeared, which really speaks to how fundamental vision is, constantly adapting and refining itself.
That's a remarkable journey, from the primordial soup all the way to our primate ancestors. Okay, but now, let's get to that real plot twist you mentioned. What if I told you that our eyes, despite all this careful evolutionary tuning, can actually pick up signals from beyond the visible spectrum? It sounds completely like science fiction, but you're saying it's real.
This is where it gets really interesting. Yeah, for decades, the standard thinking was that human vision was strictly limited to that, 400, 720 nanometer range. Visible light, period. But then this fascinating study came out in 2014. It was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, or PNAS. The lead author was Grzina Palczewska, working with colleagues from places like Polgenics, Inc., Washington University School of Medicine, and Nicholas Copernicus University. And they basically turned this whole idea on its head. The main problem they tackled was that while there had been these scattered, sort of fragmentary reports about humans seeing infrared, nobody had a clear, solid mechanism for how.
Right, the how was missing. Could humans really see near-infrared light? And if so, how on Earth?
Exactly. And what did they discover? Well, their team demonstrated through really carefully designed psychophysical experiments, those are the ones measuring perception versus physical stimuli, that humans can perceive infrared laser emission as visible light.
Seriously, what did it look like?
Participants often reported seeing it as a kind of pale greenish light. They found that our photoreceptors, both the rods and the cones, can be directly activated by near-infrared light, especially at wavelengths above 900 nanometers. And crucially, this activation showed a quadratic dependence on the laser power, which strongly indicated a nonlinear optical process was happening.
Nonlinear optical process. Okay, that sounds incredibly intricate.
Yeah.
Can you break down how this two-photon thing works, maybe with that analogy you mentioned? Help us grasp the wow factor here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's actually quite ingenious when you think about it. So normally your eye needs one decent push from a single visible light photon to trigger vision, right? That's linear. One photon, one activation. But with these powerful ultra-short infrared laser pulses they use, it's like two tiny, perfectly synchronized taps hitting the same visual pigment molecule almost simultaneously.
Like two little nudges instead of one big shove.
Exactly. Neither tap alone has enough energy to activate the molecule. But together, those two tiny taps have the combined energy to trigger the exact same reaction, that retinal shape change, as a single higher energy visible light photon.
Huh. Like trying to ring a really heavy bell.
Huh?
One tiny pebble won't do it, but if you manage to hit it with two pebbles at the exact same instant,
Precisely. They might just make it chime. The photons essentially team up.
that's a fantastic analogy. So they confirmed this.
They did. Their biochemical experiments looked directly at rhodopsin in rods, the cone pigments, even a model chromophore. And they confirmed this direct isomerization happening via the two-photon process. Plus, quantum mechanics modeling backed it all up, showing that the predicted likelihood of this two-photon absorption actually peaks around 1,000 nanometers.
Wow. So this really solved that long-standing puzzle about human IR vision. It's this two-photon absorption, not some other weird theory.
Exactly. It showed it's biologically possible.
So, okay, our eyes can do it. But you mentioned lasers. We're not walking around with laser eyes, right? Is this something we could actually, use, or are there big challenges?
Right, that's a really important distinction to make. This isn't everyday vision, not out in the natural world. It specifically required pulsed laser radiation. And participants perceived the pulsed light much, much more strongly than continuous light of the same average power. For instance, the minimum laser power needed was over 100 times greater for longer pulses compared to those ultra-short pulses around 1,000 millimeters.
Okay, so very specific high-intensity conditions.
Very specific. So while our eyes can physically do it, it's definitely not a readily accessible superpower for daily life. And the study followed super strict safety protocols for a reason. Casual exposure to that kind of IR light can actually be harmful to the eyes.
Right, safety first.
Absolutely. So it's more about understanding the fundamental limits, the boundaries of our biology, and maybe thinking about what future tech could leverage. Things like deep tissue penetration for optogenetic probes and research, perhaps. Not really by giving us night vision goggles naturally.
Got it. So, not a daily superpower, but still fundamentally changes what we thought our eyes were capable of. Okay, so we know how we see color based on evolution and the sun and water. And we've even glimpsed this hidden ability to see beyond the visible under special circumstances. But what if the real secret, the deeper why behind our vision, the specific colors we're most sensitive to, isn't just about the amount of light energy, but something, well, something more profound, like information itself?
That's precisely the groundbreaking idea proposed in that 2016 study in Scientific Reports. This was by Alfonso Delgado Bonal and Javier Martin Torres. See, traditionally, the thinking was that human eye evolution was driven mainly by maximizing the intensity of solar radiation we could absorb, get the most energy.
Makes sense on the surface.
Right. But like you said, our brains don't just register raw energy. They interpret information. They make sense of the world. And Delgado Bonal and Martin Torres suggest our vision isn't just seeking the brightest light, but rather the optimal wavelength for getting the most meaningful information from our environment. And this involves a concept from information theory called entropy.
Entropy. Okay, that can be a tricky one. Can you give us that analogy again? Help us understand what they mean by vision being driven by information or entropy.
Yeah, let's try that gift analogy again.
Yeah.
Imagine you're trying to guess what's inside a beautifully wrapped gift. If you have absolutely no clue, it could be anything from socks to a spaceship that's high entropy. Lots of possibilities, lots of unknowns.
Mm-hmm.
When you finally open it, you gain a lot of information because you resolve all those unknowns.
Right. The surprise factor is high.
Exactly. But if you already had a pretty good idea, it was, say, a book. Opening it doesn't give you nearly as much new information. The entropy was low to begin with. So, in terms of vision, it's about the process of reducing uncertainty, getting the most valuable insights from the light hitting our eyes, not just registering its brightness.
Okay, that helps clarify it. So our eyes aren't just passive light buckets, they're actively trying to resolve unknowns, to maximize useful information gain. So what did the researchers find when they applied this concept?
Well, they showed something really interesting. The wavelength where the transfer of information by radiation is maximized between a source like the sun and an observer like our eyes is actually slightly different from the wavelength of maximum energy intensity. And here's the really astonishing part, the aha moment. For our sun's temperature, about 5,800 Kelvin, the peak energy is at 500 nanometers, like we said. But the wavelength where maximum entropy, maximum information transfer occurs, is at 518 nanometers.
Okay, slightly different.
Slightly different. But the authors proposed that human vision evolved to target the sweet spot, the optimal wavelength, where the product of both energy and entropy, sort of the balance between raw power and meaningful data, is maximized.
What wavelength is that?
Get this. When they calculated this optimal wavelength, considering how solar radiation passes through Earth's atmosphere with scattering like during the middle of a bright, clear day,
Yeah.
it comes out as precisely 555 nanometers.
Wait, 555? That sounds familiar.
It should. That exactly matches the peak absorption for our photopic vision, our daylight color vision.
No way.
Yeah.
That's incredibly specific. That can't be a coincidence.
It seems unlikely, doesn't it?
So-
And it gets even better. They also looked at low light conditions. When radiation passes through the atmosphere without significant scattering, like you might get at sunset,
Okay.
the optimal wavelength for this energy-entropy balance shifts to 508 nanometers.
And how does that compare?
Almost identical to the peak absorption for our scotopic vision, our low-light black and white vision. Scientists measured that peak back in 1937 at 507 nanometers.
Wow. That's genuinely mind-blowing. So what's the core implication here? How does this information theory idea change how we think about what our eyes are really optimized for?
It basically reframes the whole thing, doesn't it? Instead of just being passive light catchers optimized purely for maximum energy, our eyes emerge as these incredibly sophisticated information processors. They're like finely tuned instruments, optimized to extract the most meaningful data from our surroundings, striking this perfect balance between the energy they receive and the actual information that energy conveys.
It's a completely new way of looking at vision and why it evolved the way it did.
Exactly. It suggests evolution isn't just about grabbing the most energy, but about intelligent, efficient data collection too, a kind of follow the information rule.
That's profound. So this perspective isn't just about humans, right? What are the broader implications?
Well, it offers this powerful new framework. It could potentially help explain differences in vision across many species.
Hmm.
Maybe different animals have different weighting rules for energy versus entropy, depending on their specific environments, what they hunt, what hunts them.
Yeah. Fascinating. So many possibilities there.
It's a really exciting new line of research, definitely.
Okay, incredible stuff. So let's maybe try and recap the key takeaways from our deep dive today.
Sounds good. So firstly, I'd say our normal visible color spectrum, it's a true marvel of evolution. It's perfectly tuned to the most available, the safest, and the most effective light from our sun, especially after it's filtered through Earth's atmosphere and, historically, water.
Right, the Goldilocks zone of light.
Exactly. Secondly, human eyes possess this hidden, maybe latent ability, though not naturally accessible day to day, to perceive near-infrared light. And that happens through this really unique two-photon absorption mechanism. It pushes the boundaries of what we thought was biologically possible.
Showing the amazing flexibility of our photoreceptors.
Absolutely. And then finally, perhaps the most mind-bending part, the very peaks of our daylight and low-light vision sensitivity aren't just about maximizing light energy. They seem to be about optimizing the information we get from our environment, thanks to this incredibly delicate balance between energy and entropy.
Yeah. From ancient oceans to cutting-edge laser labs, exploring quantum mechanics, the story of human vision is just so much richer and more surprising than just thinking about a simple rainbow. Our eyes really aren't just windows to the world, are they? They're more like these finely tuned instruments, constantly processing the symphony of light and information, extracting meaning at every single turn. It's truly incredible when you stop and think about it. And, that leaves us with a final, provocative thought for you to mull over. Considering our vision is so exquisitely designed to gather information from our environment, what other kinds of invisible information might be swirling around us right now? Information that we're still waiting to uncover, or maybe that future technologies could one day help us perceive? And how might understanding these deeper principles like this energy entropy balance influence how we design future sensory technologies? Or even help us imagine what vision might be like on entirely different planets orbiting completely different stars? This deep dive, I hope, has really opened your eyes to the incredible complexity and adaptability of one of our most precious senses.